analyzing Luis Arraez's long-term position, and the Twins make some interesting 40-man roster moves. It's all coming up on today's episode of Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Minnesota Twins podcast. Today is Tuesday, October 11th, and I'm your gracious host, Nash Walker. Thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Again, this is Nash Walker, 3 seasons on a daily basis covering the Twins on this podcast, 4 seasons writing about the Twins at twinsdaily.com. They made some interesting 40-man roster cuts today. Some guys were claimed, and one was more surprising than the other two, but all interesting as the Twins shave that thing down. They got a lot of guys on the 60-day injury list: Jorge Alcala, Danny Coulombe, Kenta Maeda, Chris Paddock, Cody Stashak, Sandy Leon, he'll be a free agent, I believe, Royce Lewis, Alex Kirilloff, Trevor Larnach, Cal Garlick. All those guys are going to be added back to the 40-man as soon as the season is over. So they're already in that process of shaving it down because they're going to have a lot of guys on the 40-man. They do have some, they have free agents leaving: Bundy, Archer, Correa. They have guys just going off into free agency, so they'll be off the 40-man, but they're going to have to make some moves, and they did make some moves today. We're going to break those down. We'll also look at Luis Arraez and what is his long-term position for the Twins, because I think it's an important question. We broke down the Gio Urshela decision last night, what the Twins should do at third. Where Luis Arraez plays is important as well. So we'll look at the metrics today, and I'll kind of speak on where I think he fits best long-term on this roster, because he's under team control for 3 more seasons as clearly a building block of this roster. So his position matters. Let's start with those 40-man moves. This is from our friend Seth Stowe's full transactions for the Twins today. John Romero and Devin Smeltzer were outrated to St. Paul. Caleb Hamilton waived and claimed by the Red Sox. Jake Cave waived and claimed by the Orioles. Jermaine Palacios waived and claimed by the Tigers. Caleb Hamilton, let's start with him. AAA depth, catching depth at AAA. I think, honestly, 2 of these guys, they know Jake Cave. They've seen a lot of Jake Cave. They brought Jake Cave back. He had a bunch of back issues last year, and he struggled. They brought him back on that 2-way deal. They know Jake Cave. Jake Cave spent a lot of games for the Twins. Aaron Gleeman tweeted he played more games than Josh Willingham, Nelson Cruz, Chili Davis, a bunch of prominent Twins. Jake Cave played and appeared in more games than those guys, it's wild. They know Jake Cave. So what Jake Cave did in the second half of this season, did that really have an impact on this decision? No. The other 2, though, I think Jermaine Palacios and how much he struggled offensively perhaps led to his waiving. Like, when I look at these transactions, the one that sticks out to me is Palacios, because I remember a time, not even like a month ago, where there was serious question about, is Palacios going to be the filler for Royce Lewis at shortstop? Like, we know this dude is a big league shortstop defensively. Can they live with his bat? And he was really, really poor at the plate in his major league debut. And I honestly think that might have played into this. And I came to that conclusion watching him. I was like, if this was an option before, there's no way he can be an option now. Like, it's just, his bat is not going to play for the Twins in 2023. He was worth negative 0.6 wins above replacement in 30 games. He got 77 plate appearances, hit 143 with an OPS at 413. He was 10 for 70 with 27 strikeouts, 4 walks. He did hit those 2 home runs at the end of the year in Chicago, but he's 26. He just turned 26 in July. And I don't think that he's going to be a good enough major league hitter to be a big league starter. Like, I think maybe he could be a backup shortstop on the Tigers in 2023, and they claimed him, or AAA depth like he was for the Twins at shortstop, because he is solid defensively, but offensively, he's not in a position to start for the Twins and be a filler for Royce Lewis before he comes back in 2023. He's just not there. And maybe if he had a great 70 plate appearances, that would have changed things, but maybe not. Maybe the Twins had come to the conclusion that he just wasn't going to be that guy. He wasn't going to fill that role for them at the beginning of next year. And that's kind of reflected in this decision. Caleb Hamilton, also waived and claimed by Baltimore. No, the Red Sox. The Red Sox get Caleb Hamilton. I think partially the Palacios thing is true for Hamilton as well. Like he came up, they clearly didn't trust him. He was the third catcher. Even Gary Sanchez, he wasn't hitting. They didn't trust Caleb Hamilton. I don't think they believe Caleb Hamilton is going to be good enough defensively to offset his bat. I think that's what they believe and why they were comfortable with him off the 40 man. I think some of these guys they would have liked to see pass through, and be able to put them back in to the system. And Hamilton probably was part of that. But I don't think that they viewed Hamilton's bat or Palacios's bat as worth their defense. Like it's just they look so overmatched. They're not in any position, in my opinion, and I think in the Twins' opinion as well, to be in a serious consideration for a 26-man roster spot next spring training. And that doesn't mean you just need to cut guys when you don't think they're going to be on the 26-man roster, but those guys specifically, I just don't know if there's even enough there to believe they'll get to a point where one day, Caleb Hamilton could be your backup catcher or Jermaine Palacios could be your primary backup shortstop. Could they still do that in their careers? Absolutely. These decisions, these cuts don't doom their careers. Like they could go on to have great careers. And I would bet that one of them will. And Jake Cave, go on, AAA depth. There's a chance all these guys are DFA'd anyway, and they come back to the Twins as free agents, and we're talking about nothing here. But they're in new orgs and they're going to get new chances most likely. It's possible again they're DFA'd and they're back, but as of right now, the Twins are trying to cut off a little bit from their 40-man roster before the crunch of the offseason. So interesting moves there. Where is Luis Arraez's long-term position? They need to find one for him, I think. They need to find a spot for Luis Arraez. Let's break this thing down from all angles after this word from our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Again, BetOnline, great platform. It's really easy to use, whether you use your desktop or your phone or whatever you use, your iPad, your Android. It's a really nice platform. It's very easy to use. You can check scores, news, podcasts, of course, betting lines. You can place bets. You can do it all at betonline.net. Check out our friends at betonline.net. It's where the game starts. Luis Arraez, let's look at some defensive numbers here to try to figure out where he can play long term. Pleasant surprise defensively at first base. He was +4 in defensive runs saved, and he was worth 1 out above average at first base this year. That's encouraging. I like to see that. I don't want Luis Arraez to be the primary first baseman for the Twins for the next 3 years. That shouldn't be the plan. That was never the plan, and it's I don't want that because they need a bopper at first base. And this is in no way to undermine what Luis Arraez does, but your first baseman has to hit for power. Like it's just not, unless you have other spots where there's maximization offensively. Like you're getting a ton from left field. You're getting a ton from center field. It would be nice to know if Buxton could stay healthy, they would be getting a lot from center field, or you're getting a ton from right field or a ton from second base. They're just not in a position where that's true, the Twins. So I think they need offense at first base. Like I would honestly argue, and we'll discuss it this offseason, they should be looking to add a first baseman in the offseason. And in that case, Luis Arraez needs to move off of first base. This is where it's interesting. When he first came up in 2019, he played 390 innings at second base. He was -9 in defensive runs saved, and he was -10 in outs above average. Since then, He was -9 in 2019 in only 390 innings at second base. Since then, in defensive runs saved, he's +8 at second base in like 800 innings. He's +8. And in outs above average, he is -5. So I guess there's a little bit of a difference there. All that to say, he's about league average at second base since 2019. At third, he was such a disaster early this year, they just gave up on him. But last year in 2021, he was +5 in defensive runs saved, -1 in outs above average. Again, about league average at third base in 2021. But these are just such small samples, like 414 and 2/3. And by the way, 0 is average in both of those. So defensive runs saved, 0 is average. Outs above average, 0 is average. Like if you're 0, you're an average defender. Um, Third base, he was -2 defensive runs saved in only 40 and 2/3 innings, and he was -7 outs above average in 2022. Really bad at third base. And they wanted a platoon of him and Urshela at third. He was really bad. Left field last year, not as much about defense. I mean, he wasn't good in left field, but more about his legs. He already has leg problems, and having him run around all in left field, and they have Kirilloff and they have Larnach and they still have Kepler. They have Wallner. He's not a left fielder. He's not an outfielder. They said, we're done with that. That was a failed experiment. And I think that's the right call, mostly for his health and also just where the roster's at. Like they don't need a Luis Arraez to play left field. And there's really not a benefit to that because left field and first base is where you should be getting your power. If you're not getting it from first, like putting him in left field is no different. Those should be your biggest spots for offense and power. And he provides a lot offensively. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying he would provide more as an everyday second baseman. If he played second base every day, his value would be more because he's playing second base. But they have Jorge Polanco at second base, which is why I think this offseason will be interesting. I wonder, and I love Polo, and I think Polo is more valuable to the Twins than he is to other teams. I think he is really valuable to them as their best left-handed hitter with Luis Arraez. Like he's switch hitter, but he's their best left-handed hitter next to Louis, and their best left-handed power hitter because they can't rely on Kirilloff, Kepler. Nicky G was good last year, Nick Gordon from the left side, but Polo is their most consistent and best left-handed hitter. And for power, Louis is their best left-handed hitter, but for power, it's Polo. And he's been pretty decent at second base defensively, and he's really cheap and under contract for the next couple of years. Those are all reasons I think Jorge Polanco could be expendable. I wonder if the Twins will come to a decision that is we need to put Luis Arraez at second base where he's graded decently, in the last couple of years. We need to put Louis at second, open up first base for more offense, whether that's Miranda, whether that is a free agent like Jose Abreu or Josh Bell or a trade, or that's Alex Kirilloff or anybody who can fill that spot with more power. Let's open that up. Let's move Louis to second, and maybe you deal Jorge Polanco. I think that's a possibility. I think Jorge Polanco has a lot of positive value, and this is not a good tool to use always because it's not perfect, but it's the one thing that we have, and these things they change. But MLB Trade Simulator, which we're going to use this offseason, I promise you, and we use it we use it every offseason to get values, and sometimes they're spot on. Like they know exactly what's going on with values. They have Jorge Polanco as a pretty plus positive value, plus 15.8. And to put that into perspective, Byron Buxton is 13.5. Emmanuel Rodriguez, who's one of the Twins' top prospects, is 14.2. Tyler Mahle, 11.2. Austin Martin, 11. So Polo's in that range. Luis Arraez is 19.7. Polanco's 15.8 in terms of value. Their most valuable player per baseball trade values is Brooks Lee at 38.9. Polo could get you, I think a borderline, I think a B prospect and a C prospect in a package in a deal. Should they be looking for prospects? Not if they're trying to win in 2023, but I think if you moved on from him and you move Louis to second base and it opened up first for somebody else, it doesn't even have to be a free agent, just somebody else. If you bring back Gio, then first base goes to Miranda. There you go. They could do that. And I don't necessarily think they're getting worse, but they would need to go out and get another bat for that to be true. Polo's dealt with some injury problems too. He dealt with a knee issue all of last year, and he's dealt with ankle problems. He's not the healthiest guy either. And it's really hard because he's been their backbone, Jorge Polanco. Like he's been their guy. I wonder though, that's the one thing that sticks out to me is if they come to the conclusion, and I have, like, I'm saying flat out, Luis Arraez should not be their everyday first baseman. And I don't think he should DH very much either. It's just, I love him. I love what he brings to the plate. I understand what he does. There's just, you need more power out of those spots. You need extra base hits from first base and DH. If you put him at second, that would be awesome. Even at third, but I just don't trust him at third. He's been bad at third. He was bad at third in 2022. He's not going to play the outfield. So that leaves second base, which is his natural position. Coming up through the minors, he was a second baseman, listed as a second baseman. That's his spot. Do you move on from Polo? Like, do you trade Jorge Polanco and his very team friendly contract to a contender who needs a second baseman? The second base market, I'm telling you, is really thin. It's very, very thin. And any contender could sign Correa, Turner, Swanson, Bogarts, and move them to second base. And there's our second baseman. But the free agent market for true second baseman is slim to none. Slim to none. I think it's Gene Segura is like the only one. He's got an option, club option. They might even pick up for him. It's so slim that teams looking for second baseman, contenders looking for second baseman, Jorge Polanco's got to be at the top of their list. Like, he has to be. He's just, his contract, the expendability for the Twins, I think, is there. It's possible that happens. That's something that sticks out to me. If you see changes that surprise, I wouldn't be surprised if they traded Polo. And it hurts me to say. I'm saying it, I'm like, oof, that hurts because I do think he's really valuable to this team when he's healthy. He had such an incredible year in 2021. He was an all-star in 2019, went through a position change from short to second. He's the longest tenured Twin in the entire organization. That's tough, but they're not scared to make tough decisions. They're not scared if they believe, Luis Arraez should be the second baseman on opening day, they'll move on, I think, from Jorge Polanco. They'll trade him and they'll get value for him. Like, they'll do, I think they would do well for Jorge Polanco. The question is, can you get guys who would help your major league roster? Can you find a match? I keep thinking of Milwaukee because I think Milwaukee's going to try to win in 2023, but they have Woodruff and Burns who have 2 years left of team control. They're not going to pay those guys. If they do, they'll pay one. They're not going to pay both of those guys. And they just signed Aaron Ashby to an extension, a good left-handed starter. They have Freddie Peralta, another right-handed starter under contract long-term. They're able to develop starters as well. I would bet money that they will trade either Woodruff or Burns this offseason. That's the fit I'm looking for. Let's help each other. Let's help each other's major league roster. And that's hard because usually you're trading with the contenders are trading with the rebuilders. The contenders are trading with the retoolers. And we saw the Twins do that at the deadline in 2021. And then they traded with the retoolers or rebuilders at the deadline in 2022. It's a tough balance to find, but someone like Milwaukee is interesting to me. Like, could they get creative and find a way to get Brandon Woodruff in a deal that involves Jorge Polanco and a prospect, and they're able to get a true ace for the next 2 seasons? If they can figure out a way to do that, I would absolutely be interested in that because you're moving Louis to second. You're really, like, you're losing Polo, but it's opening up a spot for somebody else, and you're not bringing back. You're basically swapping salary if it's someone like Brandon Woodruff because he's in arbitration. You're swapping salary and you're at the same starting point, but you have an ace, and then you have still a infield that's pretty solid, and you can go out and get a first baseman or a DH in that case. If they could pull something like that off, I would be really interested. Polo's not going to net Woodruff straight up, but Polo and like an A-level prospect, I think, would do it. And that would be more appealing to me than the Twins trading 2 or 3 A-level prospects in their system for Brandon Woodruff or Corbin Burns is going to cost, I think, a lot more than Woodruff would. But I just think that could be interesting. And for Louis, I believe his long-term home should be second base for the next 3 seasons. Is he good there? No, but he's not a first baseman. He's not a first baseman. He can play first, like, passably, but he's not a first baseman. He's a second baseman in my mind, and he's slower. His instincts aren't great, but he can play second base, and he was fine at second base this year when he played 277 and 2/3. He was plus in both categories at second base. He can do it, and if that nets you somebody who can help your rotation, significantly help your rotation, or even you get a A-level prospect for Jorge Polanco, I think it makes a lot of sense. I guess you could say all the same things for Luis Arraez. I just don't view him as a trade piece for this team. I don't think they'll trade Louis. I don't. But I guess you could say the same thing for him, right? You could say he's he's like Jorge Polanco. Like you have Polo at second. If you free up first base by trading Arraez, it's the same thing. I don't view that as a possibility. I view trading Jorge Polanco as a potential possibility for them. He's under team control for the next handful of seasons. I want to look. I think it's through. I know he has at least two team options, and he has one more year actually under contract. So they might have the same amount of team control, and they do. Yeah. So Polo's under contract for 7.5 million in 2023, 10.5 million in 2024, and then 12 million in 2025. But those last 2 years are team options for the Twins. Super team friendly. Such a team friendly contract. But he's going to be 30. Luis Arraez has the same amount of team control, but he's 25 and he just won a batting title and he's your leadoff man and he's a catalyst for this team and he is your spark plug. So I just view that as less likely, even though they do have the same amount of team control, which is interesting. Keep that in your mind. Just keep that in mind as this offseason progresses, as we get underway here after the World Series. Keep in mind the possibility that they also decide Luis Arraez is not a viable first baseman for the next 3 years, not because he's poor at it, but because they need more out of first base in the power department. They need more out of that spot, especially if they bring back Urshela to play third. If you want to bring back Gio to play third, they're going to be in a crunch. Like they're just going to be in an infield crunch. Like guys will get hurt. It's good to have depth. So I would be okay with that too. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity. And part of why you signed Jorge Polanco to this long-term deal is yes to keep him. Like to do what he's done, to see him do what he's done, but also because this contract is very valuable. Like this is a net positive contract. And I saw there was a Cubs reporter, someone tweeted and they were like, our dream second baseman is, one of them was Jorge Polanco, one of the three, a trade for a second baseman, because the free agent market for second baseman is so light. So they could take advantage of that market inefficiency. End of story. I don't view Luis Arraez as a first baseman for the next 3 years. Thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen today. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Matt Braun is coming on Wednesday. The people have spoken, and Matt is coming to talk about a Twins offseason that should be super interesting. Some big-time roster decisions, some free agents, some trade targets. It's all coming up. Thanks again. Have a great day, and go Twins.